So thank you so much. I hope everyone has got their cup of tea, their water, maybe kids are home from school as well. Thank you so much for joining us for session 3, which is our last chunk of the day, all focused on digital strategy. We're going to be kicking off this session with a deep dive into digital strategy. So I'm going to welcome our incredible panelists to the stage. So please turn on your video and unmute yourself. We have Daniel Pett, Anne Hoffmann, Lawrence Chiles, and Linda Spurdle. And Olga will be moderating this amazing discussion we're about to have.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us today on this incredible panel. You are all very inspirational. And I think your panel today will answer a lot of burning questions that our audiences have had so far. But before I deep dive into all of our questions, let's start with the introduction. Anne, I'll put you into the spotlight and please tell us more about who you are, what you do, and where you're calling us from today.
Hi, so my name is Anne Hoffmann. I'm from Luxembourg, calling from an actual office in an actual open museum. And we also have a physical exhibition opening today, so this day is as wild as possible. Yeah, I'm head of digital for the 2 museums of the city of Luxembourg and curator. But at the moment, or for the past years, more focusing on pushing our digital efforts. What does it mean? The 2 museums means we're a roof. We have this roof called the 2 museums of the city of Luxembourg, and there are 2 museums underneath, which is Villa Vauban. It's our art museum, where we focus on collecting and putting on display art from the golden ages to contemporary art. And then we have the Letzebusch City Museum. The name said it. It's more of an urban history, city history museum, which focuses on preserving, collecting, and putting on display the cultural heritage or history of the city of Luxembourg. So both museums are operating very, very differently, and there is where the challenges already lie. It's the beauty and the challenge of running digital for 2 houses as different as these, because we have, of course, 2 totally different strategies here. Yeah, that's us.
Amazing, thank you, Anne. What about Linda? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, I'm head of digital at Birmingham Museums. I'm unfortunately not based in my building; it's still closed. So yeah, I'm in my spare bedroom in relatively sunny Selly Oak at the moment. So Birmingham Museums is made up of 8 sites. They're really quite different. The largest Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery is based in the city centre. There's also a think tank, which is a science museum, and we have a Jacobean mansion, a Georgian house. You know, there's quite a few things that make up Birmingham Museum. So yeah, really quite different to think about and how we present ourselves, because we are so different. And yeah, unfortunately all closed at the moment, and in the case of Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, because of some rewiring work that we have to undertake, that will be closed until next year. So quite a few challenges going on at the moment.
I see, that's interesting. That's something that we can definitely touch on during our discussion. Daniel, tell us a little bit more about you and your organization.
Sorry, just turn the phone off. My name's Daniel Pett. I'm head of digital and IT at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. I'm also an academic and researcher, and I have been there for about 3 years, and before that was at the British Museum. The Fitzwilliam Museum was founded in 1816. It's a neoclassical building, and it's got the usual ugly modern building tacked on the side. Like Linda, we've got some challenges in our building with connectivity and wiring and cabling that's going on, but we're not going to close because of that. We're trying to do it at the same time. I think, like all museums, we're going through quite a crisis of existence in digital space at the moment and trying to work out how we can best do things, but with very few staff. I think that's part of the strategy, is how to deal with very few people, which I think we're all going to touch on today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Linda, Lawrence, Anne, and maybe the participants in the panel ask us as we go through this. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Daniel. And last but not least, Lawrence from National Gallery.
Hello, thanks for having me here. Yeah, so head of digital, similar title to everybody else. I've actually got services on the end of mine, so head of digital services. National Gallery, for us, I mean, the team and what we do, it's been grown over the last 4 years. I've been there 5 years now, but it's the team itself grown over the last 4 years. We're structured in a maybe a slightly different way to others. We've got data and insights, content production, product development and program management, and also innovation sitting within kind of what we cover. And like everyone else, you know, been through a bit of a crisis over the last 12 months, and how the galleries reacted to that has obviously impacted not what we've produced over the last 12 months, but where we go and how we think about the future. We've only got one site. It's a complicated site. We're closed like everybody else. And I think we've had 3 content strategies in this close down period. So yeah, looking forward to hearing what else I've got to say.
Amazing, that's exciting. Thank you everyone for your kind introductions. And I think we're gonna kickstart our discussion with talking a little bit about how your museum is actually using digital. I would love to hear more about how it changed over the 3 waves of the lockdown, and how long did your digital strategy survive, and what are the mitigation points there to make sure that if the next lockdown happens, or if it doesn't happen and we come back to the new norm earlier than expected, what you're going to do as an institution. And I'll put the spotlight. I will not put the spotlight. Any volunteers to take the question first? No. Okay. Linda, you're in the center of my screen, so spotlight is on you.
There was lots of parts to that question, and now I'm thinking, what was the first part? I mean, how are we using digital, I guess?
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to focus on one aspect of that, because I guess it relates to everything that happened to us during lockdown. I mean, we've tried to use, I mean, one of the big focus of digital for us has been that outward facing. How can we make our museums more accessible, you know, and engage with more people? And so that was already happening before we went into lockdown. So in many ways, you know, it put us in a good position. And that includes obviously the release of our images, out of copyright images into open access, the sharing of those sort of images so people could easily get them, but also sort of like the sort of learning engagement team, and the way that we were already trying to engage with people, for example, collecting stories and collecting images around projects. So yeah, for us, I mean, there's very many aspects of digital, I know that, but just to focus on that, because it takes us into lockdown, it actually put us in quite a good position, because we were already engaging with our audience. So that kind of lockdown audience, it wasn't like, hey, you know, you only know us from visiting. Now we're trying to do other stuff. You know, we weren't in that position, and we moved quite easily, I think, into new projects such as collecting life under lockdown images and stories and poetry and all those sort of things from people, and you know, having new projects that involve, you know, getting people to create things from our images. You know, it was quite an easy move into doing those things. I'm going to pause just at the moment because I can't remember the rest of your question. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it was a bit of a loaded question. What I was actually curious about, kind of building on what Lawrence said, that did the strategy change as we went through different ways of the lockdown, not actually knowing when we're going to come back to the new norm?
I guess the biggest difference, well, I can't say that because I don't know what's going on elsewhere, but the challenge for us always was that so many people were on furlough. So we continue to have a very, very small team. So there was limitations in what we could do. So I was just thinking about, you know, whether our strategy changed. I guess it became, I'm trying to think. I think we had to get really focused with our resources, but I don't know whether really I'd say that it changed. I think perhaps, like, as I said, we were lucky in already having that focus on trying to be accessible. and trying to be engaging with the public. So yeah, I think we were lucky perhaps in that I wouldn't say we were ready for it. We really weren't ready for it. But we were in a place where we could continue working on what we'd already began to do, rather than like facing a new beginning.
Amazing, Linda. That's you were a very lucky museum, to be honest.
Very lucky, I know.
That it was an absolute surprise. And what about you? Were you ready? Was it a surprise?
Yeah, we were kind of ready. We had a really strong 2018 and 2019 where I wouldn't say we were prepping for a pandemic, but we were pushing like maniacs to launch digital projects like every month. So I think that gave us kind of a kickstart probably. So when the museums in Luxembourg closed in March, there was, I would say, maybe enough there already, or people already knew that we had everything. Like you could have 3D visits. We had a museum application that was as interesting outhouse as in the in-house version. We already were pushing towards enough like guided tours by curators via video streaming, etc. So I think, I mean, it was okay, but what I can really tell now is we now, in our new normal, being open again, there is where we definitely already changed. And I would say there is where we will adjust a little bit our digital strategy, because we notice we're open since January again. And people are hungry to come back in the cultural institutions. I was actually pretty surprised. But I mean, of course, there are limitations, and it's sad that it's such few people who can be in the house at the same time. But nevertheless, people do want to experience something in the museum, and we feel that there is that emotional wish to come back to the houses in Luxembourg. Especially the residents have an emotional like relationship to the two houses. So we are now rethinking some digital projects to have them in a version that is also very interesting when you're actually visiting. So this is why we decided to launch a new museum audio tour. That was originally, we wanted to have it just as an outhouse version so that people can sit on their couch and enjoy it. But now we adapted it so that when you're in the museum, you also have fun, because this is something you can do individually while you're being counted and not in a group. And we do this too with, in 2019, I launched a space, we called them the Muse Tech Lounge. It's a space in the museum, kind of really a lounge. The idea was that we want people to sit down, charge their devices, and because that's what everyone always wants to do, they're always running out of battery. And we wanted to give people a possibility there to actually dive through some of our digital pilot projects. And we want to relaunch this space this year. And it actually needs a relaunch because we need to do everything differently. We have to rethink touch surfaces. We have to rethink the entire interior design and architecture. We had to take out the VR headset because you simply cannot make people wear a VR headset at the moment. So it sounds, it's a space which is not the biggest, but it's actually giving me headaches, because thinking about how to relaunch this space in a way that I can satisfy the hunger for people to actually physically come into the museum and have an online, offline, intertwined hybrid experience. This is what our new normal looks like. Long now, let me stop here. But yeah, so that's new normal is absolutely different. And we are on the one hand super scared that the government will shut down again at any minute, because we don't know. It doesn't look like it, but you never know. On the other hand, to deal with the new normal on site and digital, and to make sure both sides are still equally balanced out, is different because of the pandemic. And yeah, that's the challenge we are having now, I would say.
Oh, thank you, Anne. That's a very interesting insight, and that's something that we all gonna explore. And I think you sharing your experience and your difficulties is actually super useful for everyone who is coming from lockdown countries at the moment, because soon to open, hopefully flooding with the audiences, but that's another challenge to address. Daniel, could you tell us a bit more about what's been happening in your museum in terms of the digital strategy?
So our digital strategy has been a little bit different in some ways. We didn't rush to get things out of the door right at the beginning of pandemic lockdown. We actually went back to sort of basics and foundations amongst our staff. at the very beginning. So I'm responsible for the IT as well as the digital side of content output. And we try to transform people's mindsets about becoming digitally enabled. So I think you all went through this. We had a staff of about 100 people. Most of them couldn't work remotely and didn't know how to use these skills at the very beginning. And then we went through the furlough period, like Linda said, where people weren't available to do work. But the IT team stayed. Now we have an IT team of 2 people, and then we have me running it with them. And we have a staff of around 100 to go with it. Now, 3 people find it very hard to transfer skills to everyone. So we're very lucky to work in university. We can use the sort of networks there for extra training sessions. And once we've started on that, we can actually think about the content strategy and how we could deliver things out to the public. Without having a good foundation, we can't do very much because people can't create content. Now, the thing that we haven't really talked about in any of our strategy mentioned so far is money. Now, none of us have much money to do this stuff unless you're a well-funded national organisation normally. And even then, it's not a lot. So we've been trying to do stuff on very little money, learning about experimentation, trying out open source technologies where we can. We haven't bought anything in terms of technology during this time. We've relied on GitHub and finding things that are out there and reusing them and repurposing them and finding tools that we think might be useful. And we've done a couple of content type things for the learning audiences. So our content strategy is really focused on schools and young people. It hasn't really focused on, say, escape rooms or anything that could be sort of flashy and interesting for a lot of other people. We've done 360-degree photographs of the galleries to try and make people think they could still come and visit. And we've used 3D technologies. Now, all of these things are based on open source stuff. So any other museum that might be following this could do what we've been doing. And we've been trying to share our code. So it's all based around sort of democratic interventions, about learning from each other. And we've been looking at what's been going on in the 1x1 projects and things like that that are out there and funded, and trying to learn what they're doing and think what we can bring back in. So we've also tried to do a beta website to try and challenge what we have already. So we've got quite a staid website. I think a lot of people think that about their websites, and perhaps digital people have got a slightly different digital strategy to the trustees of the museum and the directorate. I've got the view that I want to go. It differs slightly from what my colleagues want to do. And I wonder if Lawrence has that view as well from, say, the National Gallery and Linda and Anne. Like, you know what you want to do, but it doesn't always fit with people who want to run the organizations because they have a clear view of what they think digital might do, but might not have the foundations within. I mean, that could be a different subject to discuss completely. I think perhaps I've talked enough for now, so that we can let Lawrence have a go.
Lawrence.
They just handed me over a baton there, Daniel. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think, just going back to what I said earlier, we kind of went through 3 phases of a content strategy during this period. I think the initial phase really was, as some of you already said, taking a breath and kind of deciding actually what are we going to focus on. We were, like Linda, we were kind of fairly well established as a digital team and kind of what we were producing. And a bit of a happy, in some respects, not that any of this is particularly happy, but where we were going with our IT systems, we were actually quite well on the road to moving to Office 365, Teams. It was already happening. We've got an office move that was sort of happening at the same time, which was going to actually start to produce, move people to more home working. And in very odd circumstances, those things came together just at the right moment for us. So we were incredibly lucky. So I think initial phase, we took a breath. We decided, well, what does the nation need as a national gallery? How can we support not only what we were doing for content anyway, but just kind of what do people need? And so some of the things we looked at trialing from a content point of view, we put them into a kind of 4 areas of kind of make and create, looking at 5-minute meditations, looking at kind of what this curator view at home, given that access was going to look like. And to start thinking, just to trial those and to see what was working. And we looked at that over the first few months. And so that all sort of built the building blocks of how people needed to operate and how we had to change in terms of production cycle. So that was all, you know, the first phase. I guess the next phase, we then started looking at the online program and the real shift of what we would have been doing as we knew things were going to go on for a lot longer. What was the big shift in terms of the balance between what we would have done on site and how we can do that, start to move some of those other things onto more of a broader online program, and also to support membership. I mean, that was a key thing for us, is that what are we going to do for members throughout this period? And so that started to then look at, well, you know, each of us have kind of described size of digital teams. They tend not to be huge. They're doing a lot, and previously were maybe punching above their weight. But now the focus is on the gallery, and a real observation was that the gallery, going back to Daniel's point about stakeholders and senior leaders and directors, the observation was that we were now a digital first organization, and on one hand, it's great they could actually see and really understand the work we were doing, and then we were there able to sort of like carry on with that strategy and really amplify it. So I think that came together quite well as well. But we always need to devolve what we were doing in terms of the production. Those the skill sets that were needed across the organisation maybe needed to be thought about really rapidly, and people had to jump to it to actually start producing content or to learn how you're going to structure a webinar. So we then became quite a support mechanism to kind of devise what those formats look like, again, to do trial, to see what was going to work, to assess those quite quickly. So that all came within that phase. I guess the next phase we then approached reopening, and there was a whole mobilization around that, and that changed things again. And I think where we've landed now, obviously, is that we got into a pattern, we got into a method of delivery. There were some bigger projects that were really looking at sort of on-site builds that had to change, and that process changed quite substantially. And I guess where we are now is again looking at what type of audience are we now supplying for. So we've got our strategy at the moment for content is really focused on, again, the public output, the membership output, and then also the development output and kind of what we're doing for patrons, and really being quite bespoke around some of those things.
Amazing, great food for thought, I guess, for all of our attendees. And I think something that came up a lot during the summit was this idea of the audience segmentation and really knowing who you're trying to target with your digital strategy. From what we know, that National Gallery has an amazing audience insight team, so they can draw a lot of the audience insight, but potentially other museum might not have access to this kind of resources. So how do you make decisions based on your data? And do you make decisions based on your data? And if yes, I guess what kind of data you are looking to get from your audience to make the right decisions around your digital strategy? And anyone who wants to go first with this question? Daniel, please.
So we've just brought online Tessitura during the lockdown period, and I think Lawrence's department uses that as well. And I'm not sure about Linda or Anne. It's quite a common platform for organisations, but what we're not very good at the moment is about using digital insight. I know Lawrence's museum has got a very, very strong digital insight team led by Casey, and they know what they want to get out of it. And we're trying to learn lessons from various things. If you look around, there's been great work in the past by people like Harrison Pym, who's mined data to try and show why people are doing various things in museums. They moan about cake and toilets. We all know that about museums. It's like, you want the basics first before people come in. And we're all trying to get to that unified single customer view, but we can't do that at the moment with our organisation because we have all sorts of different places collecting information. We have people using MailChimp, we have people using Wordfly, we have people using all sorts of other systems, and trying to make them all start to use unified things and think about where data might go. And GDPR as well. People aren't very good about thinking about personal protection of data as well in the past. So they might be collecting information, then publishing the mailing list online, saying all these people came to my conference, but didn't ask permission in the first place. So we're changing views about what we can do. But over time, we should be looking at what people are looking at on the website as well, and trying to send them mail about what interests them and not being too cold. So make the museum personal to people. And it's that sort of holy grail that we're all going to be heading towards. But are we reinventing the wheel quite often and not learning from each other? So one of the things I do wish people would do in the museum sector is talk more about what they actually are doing so that people can learn from each other, because we are making the same mistakes over and over again. That's it for me now.
Amazing. I think you touched on a very important point about being able to share the experience and being able to learn from each other, and that's basically what the event is for, just to exchange the best practices. And before I put in a spotlight, and I will put you in a spotlight next, we want to launch another poll that will ask our attendees to answer: how has your digital strategy changed over the past 18 months? And the second question is, what are you looking forward to including in your digital strategy within the upcoming year? So the poll will just be happening in progress, and we'll just continue our conversation. And what's happening with your data insights? What's happening with you trying to understand your audience and to target them and to personalize the museum? That I think is such an important point that so many organizations sometimes are missing.
Yeah, I'm most of the time on a personal war with the vanity metrics. We're still in a very strong learning process. We collect data, we try to read them, and we have help with that because we are a crazy small team. And so when I say I'm head of digital, I'm kind of my head and my assistant as well. So we are in total 60 people for 2 museums. Yeah, things are on the team level very, very complicated. And even if with the digital staff, I work usually with a team of 6-7 people, we have to outsource some things. So we have agencies that help us read into our data because we also are still, and especially the last year had us rethink about this, like what is our North Star metric? And first of all, we'll have 2, because the Art Museum has another North Star metric than the City History Museum. And so we're also, I heard Wouter speaking, I'm on his team. For us, it's also a lot about what kind of impact and engagement we're reaching. So it's less looking about clicks, downloads, etc., visits. I mean, that's important, of course, but as we are, as an institution, not commercially driven. So we are very lucky that we can look for impact also in other places than in pure numbers. So it's a lot about how our networking was growing, how we got feedback on other channels, how we got integrated, how the press is reacting towards us. So some projects don't look that impressive when you purely look at numbers, but a lot of people are speaking about them and we build on these. So that's, I think, very different from UK museums, where I know that there's sponsoring and partnerships. We simply do not have. That's in our structure, that's not there. So we have different, for us, there are loads of KPIs, but different ones are important when we speak to the city government for agreeing on budgets, etc. So I think that is something very special and specific for Luxembourg and the 2 museums of the city, because we're actually like run by the city government and we get 100% of the budget from the government. So there's a different way of justifying and arguing and reasoning about a certain type of projects. I don't know if that answer helped anyone, but that's our very different reality here.
Amazing. Linda, would you like to build on it? And I guess in the UK, it's a very different situation and no one is 100% state funded. I think there is large percentage, but there is still some incomes that needs to be generated and some additional fundings that needs to be found.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, just to say about data insights, first of all, I think we're in very similar situation to Dan, really, where there's much more that we could be doing, and we know that. So, you know, we're working on that at the moment. We're one of the organisations that are working on a new digital strategy just now, and we are looking much more into our audiences at this point. And one of the very interesting things for me is from the initial work that's been done is that our online audience very much mirrors the audience that visits the sites. You may say, well, yeah, that makes sense, but you know, we're a very diverse city, and unfortunately, our audience visiting the site doesn't reflect that. So, you know, it's not great to know that that's true of our online audience as well. So it's a lot to think about what we need to do, you know, to improve that in the city. I forgot what else I was going to say. I'm sorry. I mean, one of the things I was just thinking about before that I didn't talk about in terms of shift, and it does relate to this idea that we do have to, you know, try to make some money, is that, you know, we have launched a couple of things. I mean, like many other people, we've had paid online lectures, but also we've started doing this monthly subscription where people access something digital content for a month. I mean, it's really new. It's only 3 months in, so we'll see how that goes. But you have to try these things out. You have to test and see.
Amazing. Thank you, Lynn. This is very interesting. And I think something about testing and about being agile with the way museum is approaching introducing new things is something what pandemic has probably brought to the sector as well, to think a little bit less of whether it's gonna work, but think more about what it can teach us and how we can use this learning going ahead. So fantastic insight here. Lawrence, what's happening in the National Gallery? How is the data insight team, I guess, helping to make some decision, has helped you to make some decisions around the digital strategy? And I think also how the insights that you know now will help you with the reopening, and what will be happening in the next few months.
Yeah, I feel very lucky now because everyone's bigged up my team, which is great because they do a fantastic job. But I think that's been a slow road. You know, that's been something that was very deliberate, and it's exactly, most institutions are all the same. Your data will be in various different pots, and how do you begin a road to actually start to bring those together to be able to even look at them properly and collectively, and ultimately be able to ask the right questions. So that's what it all boils down to. I think we've had Tessitura in place now for, I want to say, just over a year, I think. This year has been such a blur, I have no idea what year we're even in. But that's brought, we were already in a very good place in terms of how we were structuring our data and how we were bringing that together. And we launched a couple of years ago internally a set of dashboards under a sort of product that we developed called Perspective, which is democratized, I like to use that word, the use of data across the organization so people can see and have access to the same data. So we're all talking about the same thing, which is great. Obviously during lockdown and then the reopening presented us with new sets of data because we went through to having a ticketed entry for our free entry. So that puts a very different spin on things in terms of knowing your audience and knowing that what that side of the audience, the non-ticket buying audience is coming for, or kind of when they might be coming, etc. So we've done a lot of surveys around that and with people coming in. And again, I think, like you said there, a lot of this year has been about trial and error and trialing things, testing it, seeing what's working, and being able to reflect on it and reflect on it quickly. That's how it should be. It shouldn't be a case of this just goes off to the digital team to go and work on their digital strategy now. This is stuff that's live because people want to know. So yeah, same as Linda in terms of what we've trialed. We've had two sort of paid online exhibition spin-offs, and we've looked to see how they've performed, whether they've performed well internationally, because we made some assumptions over that and thinking that, you know, we have a large international audience. By providing access like this, is that going to work? Actually, not as successful as we thought it might be. Not a lot of promotion going into that, some promotion, but that level of just that level of assumption and then being able to test that really quickly and get some information back is going to inform what we do, certainly over the next few months and then the next few years as we look to exploit. I think there's an opportunity here to exploit a digital growth period, I think, because people are consuming culture and content in different ways. And I think there is an opportunity now here to be able to exploit that and to sort of grow your audiences based on what you have to offer and what type of products and services you can, and be really finding what audience you're going for. And this goes hand in hand with any audience development strategy that you might have. To think what's going to work for you. Where are those audiences that don't come to you at all? What do you know? What can you find out about them? What are you going to understand from them to really target those people that you just, you know, that you're not reaching at all?
Amazing, thank you, Lawrence. So this is very interesting about what's been happening during the lockdown and how the digital strategy has worked. What Anne has briefly touched on is what's happening now in the new normal. We are all approaching the new normal soon. And I think what would be interesting to find out from the panel is how can we encourage visitors coming back into the post-lockdown world, both digitally and in person, because I guess a lot of museums are now planning to maintain their digital presence, but then trying to get more people coming back in the gallery once it's allowed. Anyone wants to go first?
I guess it's who's going to come back. I think, as I said, just hinted at there, I think our audience, our physical visitor audience is probably going to change quite a lot. Our international audiences are not going to come back in the next 12 months very quickly, I don't think. So it's kind of a change in approach to kind of those audiences and what those audiences might want. Is it the main collection or is it exhibitions? I think those are the sort of things we're thinking about quite hard. And that hybrid use the word of the last few months. One is the hybrid view now between experiencing content online or in digital ways, and then how that makes for a physical visit. And that starts to then hopefully think about that personalization we were talking about earlier, especially if we're still in the world of ticketed entry for our main gallery site.
Amazing, thank you, Daniel.
I think Lawrence is right. We might see more of a shift to hyperlocal people coming to the museums as well. And I think the digital engagement, I mean, you sort of say, are we going to keep going with our strategy? In some ways, we're seeing a shift back towards a panic reopening for the museum as well. And people worry more about the physical visitor and about the safety of the site. And are people going to be coming to the museum who are risk takers in some ways? They want to be out in public. And what do they actually expect when they get there? Is it going to be a safe environment? Is it going to be very empty and sort of serene? I mean, do they want to have sort of digitally enabled experiences, or do they actually want to be craving the physical thing again? So before we locked down, we're doing a lot of stuff with 3D prints for tactile work, and we'd love to be able to use those again, but we're still not sure whether we can. And it's a bit of sort of doubt about what we're doing, because it's digitally derived products. I'm sure all of us have probably got screens in galleries. We only have 2. There's debate about whether we can reuse them again, because we're still not quite sure. And I think some places are starting to use QR codes a little bit more to deliver information. I think Edinburgh, Rob Corson's been doing work on that. It's just an interesting time. I don't think we're really sure about what things are going to be working till we reopen and see what sort of things our visitors actually want. And I think if we were lucky, we'd have staff to be going out there and asking what people actually want when they're back. But that's a luxury for a lot of places, and it does take time. I think if we could do any surveying of people, it's sometimes obtrusive as well. And people get a little bit upset when you keep asking lots and lots of questions. So it's all about unobtrusive observation in many ways about what people want when they come back. Are we lucky to be able to be doing that? I think Anne described very much our situation. We don't have the team to do it at the moment. And Linda's probably in the same boat. Lawrence, you're definitely in the same boat, really. I mean, your team's not massive. It's big enough to do new things, but it's not huge. I'll be interested in how Linda's finding it as well, with the idea of being closed and about not having to rush to go back into the museum, and whether the digital strategy will keep going to try and be more digitally enabled.
Yeah, it's important for us because BMAG won't open and the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery won't open until next year, but nevertheless we still have the same problem with all the other sites, and thinking yeah, what response people are going to have to them reopening, especially Think Tank, which didn't open, which is the one which is mostly for families and kids, and we didn't reopen it during that short time last year. So, and there's so many, you know, interactives, everything's hands-on, you know, and we do have to think how a family's going to react to that now. You know, is it still something they want? Will it be put off? But you know, but we also know people are really excited for that museum to reopen. We get asked about it all the time. When's Think Tank reopening? When's Think Tank reopening? So I'm hoping that enthusiasm to come back is there. I mean, I know that it was there when we opened for that brief time, and that included Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery at the end of last year. In fact, we had a little bit of an issue because we had our Cold War Steve artwork on display for the first time, which had gone crazy during lockdown because we'd been able to share it to them. We'd been able to change the project, so it was always just going to be an exhibition in the gallery. But once we couldn't do that, we turned it into something else, an online project basically. But people come in their droves to see it, and we actually had to keep moving people on, not to stand and watch it. So, you know, if people are really passionate and enthusiastic about something, yes, they will definitely come back to see things. But yeah, it's quite we're thinking at the moment basically about, you know, with a hopeful reopening of things, how do we keep that interest in Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and you know, which is, like I said, it's our biggest site, it's our most visited site, and yeah, there's quite a lot to think about, because although we've been doing this during lockdown, I think something has to change. We have to you know, have a bit of a different approach, which we're planning at the moment.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, guys. So we're coming to the end of our session, and I'm just really keen to leave some time for the Q&A. But before we wrap up, can you give some advice to other museums who are today with us about, I guess, maintaining their digital strategy going forward. And what are the things that you would want to know, let's say a couple of months ago, that you would just tell them to keep an eye on? Yes.
I think I'd like colleagues to document what they do. One of the really frustrating things about when you move into a new job is finding out where things were done in a certain way and about how you can pick them up. And the digital world moves really quite quickly. And it's, why did you choose that technology? And why did we do that? Or what was the driver as well? Because quite often we do projects and we can't actually remember what the point was at the very beginning, because it might be one that started 10 years ago. We're just trying to get to fruition now. I think it's also asked people as well about how things are working. So Linda asked me about Tessitura a few months ago. Just said, I noticed you've got that. Can you give me any advice? And I think don't be afraid about asking people about what's going on. We're all in that difficult situation. And museums are meant to be memory institutions and knowledge sharing. And they should share information about why they've taken a certain product on or project or staff type of role. So I'd love to be able to explain to my board why we need some of the roles that Lawrence has described, for instance, so taking away that knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
I was going to agree with Dan there, and also the things we're all trying out at the moment. It would be great if people did share, you know, whether they worked or not. You know, we're all experimenting, and it would be nice if that was more widely known, and we could learn from all of those things. I think you know, at the moment, I think if people are planning ahead, I think you can't right now be planning 5 years ahead. I actually think it would be crazy of you, because we just don't know what's happening day to day. So our digital strategy that we're working on at the moment, we're looking at 2-year digital strategy. But as I said, even that seems so. I think think of those things. I mean, you have to think of you know, what you want to do, your audiences, how you need to get there, but it has to be achievable. You know, there's no point thinking of things that would involve loads and loads of money, for instance, if it's never been going to be there. But once you get things that are realistic and achievable, I think it's actually surprising how fast you can move forward with those things.
Amazing. Anne, what about you? What kind of advice would you give to our attendees today? The entire cultural sector.
I mean, I am always very hesitant when it comes to general advice, because I think it's like I cannot give advice. Like I could not compare myself to Lawrence and his museum. Like I probably cannot even, like I find it really difficult. And so if I now have to give advice, because that's why I'm sitting here, I'd be very careful in how to put it. But for a museum which is in a very similar situation to ours, similar size, similar budget, similar mission in what we want to come across, what worked for us and what at the moment seems to be still working is really keep on trying, experimenting. Like for us, what still is our strategy, and again, we're in the lucky position that we can do it like this. We have one director, not a board of directors, so flat hierarchies. Like I pitch to a director, and if he's on board, I'm so agile, I can go. And that's very difficult in other situations. So it's, for us, innovation means, of course, using technology, but also the process and the attitude is what is really important for us. So we want to be understood, or we want to keep on being understood as a partner for startups and for communities and for our audience to come to really try out things. And sometimes the process is even more interesting than the actual end result. And I always use, we had a robot project. We still, like, we got rid of the robot afterwards, but the entire project which was like 8 months with the University of Luxembourg, was so interesting in terms of innovative. It was innovative. We learned a lot about ourselves. The visitor learned about. So I think just keep on exploring and pushing your borders, and keep on really launching projects so that the digital momentum stays. We will keep on working now on the hybrid, because we need to think of the physical visitor now. That's important after being closed, and we need to get the visitor numbers up. So for this year, I know what I try to do. If the situation stays like this, then again, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. I don't know what's going to happen. So we will definitely work on those projects, which will be a hybrid. So there will be something that will work in-house and out-house, which will like give an incentive for people to come to the museum, but keep on exploring us like during, after, or before the visit digitally. It feels a little bit like a step back to 2018, to be honest, because there we were just like push out and work on the digital. At the moment, we feel a bit like we need to really push people back, like get them back into the house, because that is important and this is expected of us. So I'm not making too many plans that go too far ahead. Like it's difficult.
Amazing. And last but not least, Lawrence.
So many things to pull on there, but I'll try and keep it short. I mean, for us, you may have seen in the press, you know, we've had a big announcement of a architectural build. So the gallery has some really big capital and physical changes that it's going to face as we work towards our bicentenary in 2024. So for me and the team, we've got that kind of goal. So it's a 4-year plan really to get to that kind of, including the bicentenary. But I agree with absolutely everybody, is that in some respects it's pointless having a 5-year plan at this stage. I think you've got to focus on really still dealing with the immediacy of the situation that still might ever change. And as we bring those audiences back and what they're going to need to support the visit, I think stuff that Dan said there about coming on site, you know, all those considerations have to still be thought about in the most immediate future, and that's all you can really focus on. But I think one thing that's been, you know, there's been a lot of good coming together across organizations, and I think that's something that Anne just said about momentum is a really interesting point, to kind of keep that momentum and to keep that kind of fostering of collaboration, because that's what this has done. It's forced people to share. It's internally and externally to a certain degree, or to share more, and it's forced people to have to come together to find solutions to things. That's really quite exciting. I think it needs to be fostered, and it needs to kind of continue working, whether that's if we're all still working from home in 6 months' time or we're all back in the office. But I think that coming together to support and to find solutions is what we need to kind of keep the momentum about. And just holding the audience at the center of everything, just holding the audience at the center of all those design decisions, and really pulling back to that, because that's where you end up with great products.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're just going to briefly answer a couple of questions that I have now in Q&A, because I'm conscious that we are running out of time. So we have a question from Anonymous. There can be an incorrect assumption by some colleagues that digital automatically means inclusive. How much research, feedback, data on inclusion are people putting into their digital strategies? And again, where we speak about inclusions, examples would be for communities of lower incomes, with disabilities, language barriers, etc.
Can I jump in? Because I think like that's, first of all, we do not do enough research there, definitely. So I'm like, we're guilty as charged. Like we're definitely not as accessible enough. That's what we'll probably never be. I think that's what we all have to work towards, to more here in our institution. On the other hand, our vision for the foreseeable future, again, we know we're in a very lucky position here, is like, we want to keep the digital offer as accessible as possible, at least when it comes to money. So we will not monetize what we currently have on display. Like, again, this can change. This is, again, the moment speaking. I know that is a crazy, luxurious, lucky position for now, because we simply have the possibility to do so, but we also, because we're still working hard on our brand awareness and to still fight hard to make people aware of our digital offer. And we still fight very hard, especially for the younger public, 15, 18, etc. And we think that having them pay for something like a museum app or VR experience, etc., they will prop our audience, like how we interpret the research we did, is we don't think they would pay for it. So we, for now, will keep this, at least this is some sort of accessibility, which, I mean, we'll see, knock on wood, how long we'll be able to do it like this. I mean, we don't know, but for now, you don't have to pay for the digital offer of Lydia Museum.
Amazing. Anyone wants to expand on this question from the panel?
I think
just to echo Anne's point, sorry, go on, Linda, you go.
I was just going to say, just to say that we are, we are really aware of this. We are aware of this, especially that some people who are on the, they say the other side of the digital divide, and that kind of really come to home with some of the work of the community engagement team, which they did continue during lockdown, but they couldn't do it in this way via Teams or Zoom or anything like that. They were literally phoning people up and sending people letters because of, the people that were involved. That was the way they had to do it. And so again, it kind of really brings it home to you that in some ways you can't touch these people using digital. But other than that, I think, I was talking about our audiences not being, not reflecting the city, not being diverse for in the many different ways. I think it's something we really want to change, but it's not just digital that will do that, but it's certainly part of it. It's what we're planning out doing now as part of our digital strategy. How do we support that work? So there's no easy answers, but we're aware of it and we want to help change that.
Amazing. Lawrence, you wanted to add something before we wrap up the panel?
Yeah, just to echo Anne's point about that commitment to free, I think that's something the gallery director has spoken about in public. It's something that we want to remain committed to. I think the inclusion question is something that is always at the heart of everything that we do. One of our recent exhibitions that only open for 7 days, but will open when we reopen, Sensing the Unseen, was built very much with audience as part of that, and inclusion and kind of how we'd actually deal with a digital exhibition, but making sure it was accessible as possible was built right into the design process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for your time today. It has been absolutely an amazing panel. I still have loads of questions in our Q&A, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Thank you so much. We are hoping to see your museums in person very, very soon. And fingers crossed, we're not going to go into another wave of the lockdown, but keep up the good work. And I think hybrid model is something that pandemic definitely helped us to finally come to terms with.